The female translator was horrified to discover that the latest novel she was translating had cursed the first person to read it with a curse that would wipe out his or her family, and the first one will be killed tonight. At first, the woman didn't pay much attention, thinking it was a trick of the author, but that night, he was woken up by a scream at the door. He went outside to find his favorite dog brutally murdered. He panicked and associated it with a curse and called the police to report it. But the policewoman didn't care that it was just a dead dog. She scolded the woman for wasting her resources. So Kaya told her husband about the curse. But the husband thought he was making a big deal out of it and urged him to go to work. But as soon as she arrived at the office, Kaya was called home by her husband, because shortly after she left, the nanny of the house was mysteriously and brutally murdered. Luckily, her husband had left the house and realized he'd forgotten something. Kaya panicked, blaming the policewoman for the dog's death last night, and the curse would have prevented the nanny's death. But the policewoman still doesn't think there's a connection between the two incidents. She also said that the nanny's death was probably a burglary murder, because according to the examination, they found that the nanny's gold necklace was stolen. In order to confirm that Kaya's claim that the curse is not related to the case, the policewoman immediately confirmed with Kaya the people who knew about the necklace, and the first suspect was the nanny's only relative, her nephew, because after the nanny's death, he came to see the lawyer and was happy to inherit the nanny's $700,000. So the policewoman interrogated him for 3 days, but she found out that the nephew, who was eating at a restaurant on the day of the murder, had an alibi and couldn't have committed the crime. The policewoman wondered if the death of the dog and the nanny were really related to the curse. Meanwhile, the security guard hired by Kaya's husband suddenly noticed that the male neighbor next door was always looking around the house. He looked very suspicious. The security guard thought he was the murderer and ran up to him. The neighbor says he's innocent and that he suspects Kaya's husband, Kraft, is the killer. He told the guard that on the day of the murder, while walking his dog, he saw Kraft leave the house first and then Kaya. But soon after that, Cav returned and stayed for less than 5 minutes before he rushed out of the house. When the guard heard that this time difference could have killed someone, he became suspicious of Kraft, so he secretly asked Rose, the woman Kraft kept outside the house. Rose said he did come to her house that day. When the security guard calculated the time of Kraft's departure, it coincided with the case, so the security guard tried to talk to Kraft, but when he understood, he got a stern look on his face and told him to mind his own business. He said that as the owner of the company, he wouldn't be able to steal from the customers. He threatened to fire him at any time, but the security guard was still uneasy and told the policewoman about his suspicions. Soon after, at the nanny's funeral, the police suddenly appeared and wanted to arrest Kraft on the spot. He said he'd found out that he'd mortgaged his property and owed a lot of money. He was likely to steal the necklace to pay off the debt and kill the nanny to silence her. Kaya was shocked and couldn't believe that her husband was behind it. But eventually, the man was taken away. When questioned, he insisted he hadn't committed a crime. He wouldn't talk without physical evidence. The security guards had to tell Kaya what they had found out. He showed him a piece of surveillance footage from the day of the murder. Kraft had come to the neighborhood supermarket and deposited something and then withdrew it. The security guard suspected that he had hidden the loot in his office. Kaya saw it, but still didn't want to believe that her husband was a thief and murderer. So the next day, the policewoman led a search in the office and found the stolen necklace in a jar. Now, with the physical evidence in front of him, Kraft suddenly admitted that he did steal the necklace, but didn't kill anyone, and he blamed the nanny's nephew for the murder. On the other hand, Kaya suddenly received a text message from this nephew. He asked her to meet him at his home and talk to him. So the two of them, accompanied by the security guard, came to the house, but as soon as she stepped in the door, she was shocked to see her nephew hanging from a beam. This girl suddenly realizes that the novel she's reading has cursed her to lose her family one by one, and the clock starts ticking after she reads this one. At first, the girl thought the author was just trying to attract attention, but the next day she finds her nanny dead. Kaya immediately thought of the curse and told the policewoman, but she didn't believe him and advised him to believe in science. But the same day, Kaya found out that the web story had been updated. It mentioned the famous ballet Swan Lake. She panicked, because she only had a best friend who practiced ballet. Terrified, she immediately told her girlfriends to be careful, but her best friend laughed out loud when she heard it. "This mansion is too safe for someone to come in and kill me." She said that Kaya must have been scared out of his wits for a couple of days. Kaya hoped that she was overthinking it. The next day, she woke up and found her best friend dead in the bathtub. She was completely flabbergasted. Did the curse of this novel really exist? And according to the police investigation found, her best friend died of electrocution because the bathroom dryer cable fell into the bathtub and caused a short circuit. But how could an electrical appliance in good working order suddenly have an accident? Kaya had to raise the curse with the policewoman again. This time, she decided to follow the novel's content. It's too late. The web novel has been updated. This time, the author mentioned the word first love. Kaji wondered if his first love would be the next to be killed. As a precautionary measure, Kaya contacted his first love, love, whom he hadn't seen in years. He asked him to come to his home. Coincidentally, his first love said he had something important to tell her recently, so what he has to tell her is related to the curse of the novel. And then Kaya reviewed the case with the security guard and his best friend, trying to find any clues in her best friend's case. Strangely, Kaya's single male neighbor turns up out of nowhere, and brought them a video of his own CCTV camera in the back garden. He said that his CCTV had captured the day of Kaya's best friend's death. A man dressed as a delivery man broke in. Kaya tried to identify him, but the video resolution was too low, and the man was too dressed to see who he was. And then the male neighbor suddenly said he had a heart attack, so they called an ambulance and took him to the hospital. Before the neighbor left, he left Kaya a key to his house and asked him to take care of his dog. Kaya took the dog and stayed at the security guard's house for his own safety. And before she could sit down, the guard suddenly handed her a silk scarf. She recognized the scarf as that of her boss, the editor-in-chief. She asked what it meant. The guard explains that I found it by accident at your house the other day. I suspect that your editor-in-chief may have something to do with the case, because she was the one who asked you to translate this novel, and you were the first to see it before it was published. But Kaya thinks it's ridiculous. Maybe the editor left it by accident when she came to the funeral. The security guard believed that the editor didn't have a scarf with him that day, so they decided to ask her in person. But the policewoman beat them to it, because he found out a shocking result. The editor-in-chief was in a relationship with Kaya's father and had a daughter. Kaya was shocked because her real parents had been dead for more than 10 years. She didn't know that her father had a lover and an illegitimate daughter. So the policewoman suspected that the editor's mother and daughter wanted to use the horror novel to psychologically damage Kaya and eventually cause her death, so that they can get Kaya's inheritance. But the editor-in-chief denied it, saying that her daughter was sick for years, but never wanted to harm anyone. After a few conversations, the policewoman decided to go back to her investigation and asked Kaya to keep an eye on the novels, especially Your First Love. As the saying goes, speak of the devil. Kaya's first love has arrived. Facing the crowd's questions, First Love said that he had received a mysterious anonymous email a while ago. He said he'd give him $1 million if he could continue his relationship with Kaya. In response, he ignored the email, thinking it was a prank, but he was soon asked again. So he decided to say yes and show the email to Kaya. But when he checked his mobile phone, the email mysteriously disappeared. The girl died because she read an online novel where her nanny best friend and first boyfriend left her, and the cause of death was just a curse mentioned in the novel. Kaya first suspected that the murderer is the author of the novel, but his best friend said it was impossible, because he had already checked and found that the author especially liked a recluse, and he's been staying at his manor for 2 months, so there's no chance that he could have committed the crime. Seeing that the investigation has once again come to a dead end, Kaya is at a loss, because according to the novel, the next person to die is himself. But a new clue suddenly appeared on its own. The editor-in-chief suddenly revealed an important information to Kaya. Kaya's father had a son from a previous marriage, but it seems that Kaya's father didn't treat the mother and son well. In the end, the first wife killed herself, and the son was sent to an orphanage. Kaya wondered if the son was the mysterious killer. The editor-in-chief said she wasn't sure either. After 30 years, she couldn't recognize the boy's face. The security guard also suspected that Kaya's brother was someone he knew, and he lives in the neighborhood. In the last few months, only single male neighbors have suddenly moved in. Could it be him? But Kaya didn't think so, because he had offered to give us the surveillance footage of the mysterious man to see if the killer would be that stupid. In order to find out who Kaya's brother is, the security guard and Kaya split up. The guard brings the policewoman to the male neighbor to try and find out who he really is, and Kaya went to the orphanage where his brother was sent, and the staff helped him to find out the documents of the past. To his surprise, he found that all the documents had disappeared. At this moment, Kaya is sure that his brother is involved in the case, but where can he retrieve the files? The staff thinks there's an old retired officer who might remember. He's in a nursing home right now. Kaya immediately came to see this old man. He really remembered Kaya's brother. He said that he had been a poor boy since he was a child. Not only did his father not love him, but his mother abused him, and people said he was a bad boy who bullied other children. But in my eyes, he was actually very kind. But when Kaya asked him if he had contacted him recently, the old man said he hadn't spoken to him since he was adopted. He didn't even have a picture of him. I just remembered that he stammered when he was nervous. It occurred to Kaya that the male neighbor did stutter. Could it really be him? Kaya immediately went home to talk to someone else, but the only person in the house was her best friend. But just as she handed her coffee and turned around, she saw the tumbler of death in the bathroom on the table. In an instant, it all became clear to her. Her half-brother was her best friend, and the next thing she knew, she was being laughed at. She was laughed at for being so stupid as to suspect her male neighbor. Kaya wanted to know if he had been wronged by his father and wanted revenge. I understand what you've been through, but why did you kill him? The man explains that he killed Kaya's dog because his father killed his dog too, and the nanny's nephew died because he happened to see him posing as a delivery delivery boy and had to kill him. And he's the author of the internet novel. But why does he know Danish? Turns out he was adopted by a Danish family and discovered his talent for writing. The novel became a tool for revenge. Kaya couldn't accept it. You killed your own wife for revenge. The man said he had no choice but to kill her because she was your best friend. I had to use her to get to you. Of course, you have to throw her away when you're done with her. As for Kaya's father, the man confessed that he had tampered with the car and killed him in an accident. That's crazy, so many people have died. But the man still felt it was unfair that he couldn't let Kaya feel the same pain he had felt. So he prepared a great gift for him. If Kaya would just kiss himself, his novel would be finished and everything would be over.